Hello and welcome back to the Podforce One podcast. I'm Miranda Devine. Our weekly podcast features the biggest players in Washington. And today we're coming to you from the US Treasury. And we're speaking with one of the most important figures in global finance, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Thank you very much, Secretary Bessent, for being our second guest on Podforce One. I know you're incredibly busy. And you've brought us into this absolutely beautiful room in the historic Treasury building. Can you tell us a little about it?
Miranda, first of all, congratulations on the podcast. This room is one of 3 museum offices here in the fantastic Treasury building. Salmon Chase was the Treasury Secretary for Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, and he financed the United States or the Union Army. So he created the term greenback. And
really?
he led the war effort. And there have been several times during the course of the United States history when Treasury has been called on to really hold the nation together. Once was during the Civil War, during the Depression, during World War II to finance the war effort, and then during COVID. But we're sitting here today. This office, it's the exact furniture. His portrait is in here. Same everything. So this is a museum quality office. It's not my office.
Yes.
It's the general counsel's office, but I like coming down and sitting in it sometimes.
It must be incredible for you to come from Wall Street to basically your living history. Your predecessor, the very first Treasury Secretary, was, of course, Alexander Hamilton, the original tariff man.
Was.
Are there echoes in his career in what you're doing today?
Well, look, Alexander Hamilton set up the financial system for the U.S. government. But before then, it was this loose alliance, and a lot of states they issued money. There were banks. There was no central bank. It all happened in Alexander Hamilton's head.
Right.
It's incredible.
Brilliant.
And one of the things that happened in his head was this idea of tariffs. And he did it for 2 reasons. One, to finance the Treasury. So the U.S. government used to be solely financed by tariffs, sole form of revenues. And then 2, to protect nascent U.S. industries from the British, from the French, because he was trying to develop an industrial base. And as I always say, President Trump has added a 3rd leg to the tariff stool, and that's negotiations. So he uses tariffs for leverage. So he's using it to raise revenues. He's using it for our industry, and he's also using it for negotiations, which is very powerful, very powerful. So, 2 weeks ago today, I was in the Fox green room, and the president announced that he was thinking of putting a 50% tariff on the European Union.
Right.
And the European Union is very difficult to negotiate with. There's 27, 28 members. They have a collective action problem. The Germans care about cars. The French care about agriculture. Right. I'm not sure what the Spanish care about. And, but it's the old Henry Kissinger saying, when I call Europe, who do I call?
Right.
And the Ursula von der Leyen was not really coming forward in terms of a tariff negotiation. So once the president threatened to put on a 50% tariff, 4, 5, 6 of the European state leaders called him, and then he was on the phone with her within 48 hours, and the Europeans have started moving forward.
We were told when Donald Trump upended world trade with all these tariffs that we were going to have a recession, that inflation was going to soar. Has that happened?
Well, Miranda, I call it TDS, and a lot of people think that's Trump derangement syndrome. Right. It's tariff derangement syndrome.
Right, the next stage.
The next stage.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of Democrats are in favor of tariffs, but now that President Trump is leading the charge, they can't be. And, so they call them the Trump tariffs. And that all these predictions have just been baseless and a flop, and nobody wants to admit it. Nobody wants to admit it. That the CPI, the PPI were both 0.1% last month. And we had, which was, the cumulative was the best number since 2020. And the month before that was the best number since 2021. We haven't had a recession. As a matter of fact, the economy is very strong. Household income growth was 0.7 or 0.8% in April. For 1 month, that's out of the park.
And you've got some other good news, haven't you, about blue-collar wage growth?
Blue-collar wage growth, the only other time it's been this high, wait for it, was during President Trump's first term. So we've seen real wages for hourly workers, non-supervisory workers, rise almost 2% in the first 5 months.
Why is that?
No president has done that before.
And why is that?
It's the president's emphasis on manufacturing. I think there's also likely a component of whether it's 12 or 20 million illegal aliens coming out of the workforce. And Joe Biden opened the border and it was flooded. And that for working Americans, that's a disaster because it's pressure on their wages.
And so blue-collar wage growth went down during Biden.
It did.
And it's back up again just in a few months.
In 5 months.
5 months.
5
wow.
months.
That's amazing. You've just been named the most popular Treasury Secretary in history. What's the secret? And what's your relationship like with Donald Trump?
Well, look, it's all the secret is following President Trump's lead.
Right.
Because he has incredible instincts. I am fortunate that his knowledge of the economy, his instincts, we haven't had a president like this for over 100 years, maybe ever. Someone who comes from the business community, who wants to do deals, and he's reconstituted the Republican Party. Because when you think about it, you have the richest people in America from Silicon Valley on one side, and then 2 weeks ago tonight, I was in Pittsburgh with President Trump at a U.S. steel plant, and it was incredible. It was incredible. The steel workers and the warmth and his feelings for them, their feelings for him, and those were working class Democrats, and not anymore, because President Trump cares about them. He's gotten great trade deals. He realizes that we have strategic industries that were slipping away from us, like steel, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals. We got to bring them back home.
And you used to be a Democrat donor. What made you decide to throw in your lot with Donald Trump? And I mean, did you lose friends?
Let's talk proportionality.
Right.
So in my life, I have probably given 95% to Republicans, 5% to Democrats. Okay. And the New York Times and others like to refer to, I gave $100,000 to Al Gore in 2000, which things might have gone a bit differently in Iraq if that had happened. But again, it's back to President Trump has reconstituted the best parts of the Republican Party, and it's for everybody. It's not the country club anymore. It's not big business, but it's pro-business, but with an eye on working Americans. And that's what we really lost. When China came into the WTO, there's something called the China shock. And working Americans were just left on the side of the road. The Democrats took them for granted. The Republicans didn't think that they could get them. And I think, back to your question on wages for working Americans, they're doing fantastic under President Trump.
You talked about the China shock. Do you think back in, 2001, when we allowed China to join the WTO and it has special advantages, do you think that people should have realized that it was going to be so damaging to American workers?
I think they should have realized that there should have been better guardrails. Mm-hmm. So I think, I'm trying to think who it was. Oh, it was actually Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, said that we had capitalism without guardrails.
Right.
And I spoke to him the other day and I said, what a great phrase. And I think that the U.S. economy got more and more financialized. The coastal elites were doing great. And then the middle of the country just got hollowed out. And the Democrats have this strategy called compensate the loser,
right,
which is just more benefits, more
welfare.
Welfare. We don't care what's happened to your community. And I'm sure you've seen the same surveys that I have that say that would you be willing to pay a little more if your community was back to the way it was? And this isn't. This gets mocked by the what I would call the orthodox, hardcore free market right, and by Democrats as being this nostalgic concept. We have 9% of the workforce is in manufacturing, and it's a fact that you get much stronger wage growth for the workers in manufacturing jobs than the service economy. So, sorry, the steel plant, the auto plant, the ball bearing plant has closed. Have at it at McDonald's.
The new posture, I guess, towards China now with Donald Trump. You just recently flew to London to have some pretty willing trade negotiations with the Chinese. And I think this was just over the sort of retaliatory measures that China had slapped on America. For instance, magnets and some rare earths they had put a ban on, and then we'd slapped some payback to them. And so did you manage to sort that out? And do you think that we're going to get to a point that Donald Trump has said he wants where China opens up to America?
Well, on the whether they'll open up, we'll see. So if we go back on April 2nd, President Trump and the economic team gave out reciprocal tariffs for the world. And I think China's was maybe at 34% or something. It was, if you want to come negotiate, you can negotiate, but do not escalate. And the Chinese were the only ones to negotiate, escalate.
Right.
And then it turned into this tit for tat.
Yeah.
And then we were at 145% tariffs on them. They were at 125% on us, and which is effectively an embargo.
Yeah.
And, I believe that Chinese were feeling more pain. Their system takes pain better. But I believe it was probably very painful for them because that we import 3 times more than we sell to them. So we are the deficit country in the history of trade wars. The surplus country always takes more pain.
And their economy is not doing very well, is it, at the moment?
They're in the middle of a real estate downturn. Some might call it a crisis. Mm-hmm. They've had low growth. There's something called the middle income trap for developing economies. And what we will see with China is, can they be a reliable partner? So from COVID, we learned, and this may be the only good thing that came out of COVID, was that we have to bring back strategic industries to the U.S. Again, steel, semiconductors, medicines, some others. And these rare earth magnets, and we have an over-reliance on China and other countries, not necessarily our allies for these. And we're bringing that back home. So I would call that a strategic decoupling. The idea of a generalized decoupling and the 2 largest economies not trading with each other is not a great thought. So the ball's in China's court. We are definitely doing a strategic decoupling for important industries. We would like for them to open up and they buy more U.S. goods and services, allow us market access, because it's crazy. China's tariffs are only about 5%.
Right.
It's just the non-tariff barriers that are really tough. We gave them full access to our market. we have so many things on the shelves here that are Chinese products. So, look, if they are in the mood to help rebalance trade with us, then we can do it together. And then if not, it's going to be choppy.
So what's your prediction then? How do you think it's going to go now? What's the next stage?
So we had a meeting in Geneva, May 11th and 12th, to bring down, basically end the embargo, 145%, 125% tariffs. We each brought them down 115. So we're at 30 that were put on this year, plus another 20 from President Trump's first term. So we're at 50. They're at 10. That's fine. But what the Chinese had also done in April, they put on a series of non-tariff trade barriers, what they call countermeasures. And one of them was putting these rare earth magnets, which are it's this crazy little product that's in everything.
Yes.
It's in your iPhone. It's in your car.
But how scary that we're reliant on them for it.
Well, I blame the past administrations for letting this happen. And one thing that we're determined, the national security team, which I'm on, the national economic team that I'm on, we will not leave in 2028 without having solved many of these problems, all of these problems. We are not going to be held hostage or over a barrel, and we'll go from there. We'll go from there. The meeting in London was to establish. We were trying to take off the export controls. So the magnets were not flowing as promised in Geneva. Right. Unclear how much was just a glitch in the Chinese system, which is a slow command and control system. In the meantime, we had put some countermeasures on them. Some of them got publicity. We had embargoed aircraft engines, engine parts.
Grounded a few of their planes.
I think grounded a few of their planes. We were reviewing the visa status of Chinese students. We were withholding ethane, which is the base product for plastics. So the idea is we agreed in London, magnets start flowing. We will take down our countermeasures, and then we'll probably have another in-person meeting again in 3 weeks to see if we can do this mutual rebalancing. And look, it should be natural. President Trump wants the U.S. to manufacture more and become a manufacturing powerhouse for precision manufacturing again. There's 30% of global manufacturing now, which is too high.
Yes.
And it can't go higher. It can't go higher. So the way for them is not to try to export their financial problems, is to switch to the consumption model. And if we could do that together, it'd be incredible.
And now Howard Lutnick is the Commerce Secretary, has been, I guess, put into this team with you. And I think it's part of Donald Trump's team of rivals philosophy, because there's been a lot of talk about you're both billionaires from Wall Street, some competition between you.
Wait, Miranda, you know what I love? On the internet, I'm 6'8" and I have $5 billion. Neither one of those is correct. And look, President Trump fills the right people with the right jobs with complementary skill sets. So I actually think that we work quite well together. I think that there
are a few troubles at the beginning.
Sorry,
butting heads.
Look, some people in the cabinet knew each other quite well.
Yeah.
Secretary Lutnick, Howard, and I are both from the private sector. We've never been in government before,
right?
So everyone's feeling their way around. But I tell you, the camaraderie in the cabinet's incredible.
Yeah.
When we have the cabinet meetings, we're getting a lot of business done. And think how transparent President Trump is in these meetings.
It's incredible.
The last one, if it went for 2.5 hours, all but 10 minutes was televised.
Yes.
Yeah, President Biden didn't have a cabinet meeting for 10 months.
Yeah.
If the cabinet wanted to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove him, they couldn't have because they hadn't seen him.
Yeah. Elon Musk was a little bit of a thorn in the side, I think, for a few of the cabinet members, including you. And I asked President Trump about the famous stoush between you and Elon Musk, where there was a shouting match outside his office, and Elon Musk reportedly shoved you. Is that true?
We have had disagreements, but we both want to get to the same place. We both want to eliminate the waste, fraud, and abuse in government. The Silicon Valley mode of operation is move quickly and break things. I always say here at Treasury, we move deliberately and fix things. I think Elon's probably fancies himself more of a Viking. I think I'm more of a ninja. Sort of the submarine surfaces, fires, goes back under. And look, everybody's very passionate about doing the best job for President Trump and the American people. And
did you call him a total fraud?
Absolutely not.
And he said that he was going to save $1 trillion. Is that in spending? I mean, how did we get the spending under control, I guess, if Doge can't do it?
Well, I think what Doge has done that's very important is Elon set the pace, and Doge is a movement. So he set the base, and look, he was vilified by the press, by the Tesla customers, and I think,
and that probably put stress on him.
Oh, I would have been.
Yeah.
I mean, and the personal safety, domestic terrorist attacks on Tesla vehicles, it was insane.
Yeah.
And I think in a way that the base that he's set and some of the people he's brought into government and the ethos. So I think of Doge as an ethos. And to the extent that Elon has departed physically, I think that ethos is there, and the momentum for what he's done will yield bigger and bigger savings over time.
He is right about the debt, though, isn't he? I mean, it is a train wreck ahead at some point. Is there any way of the debt ceiling obviously isn't working? Is there any way of dealing with the debt in our lifetime?
What we're trying to do is there are two ways to fix the debt. One, spend less, and we are getting spending under control. Whether it's the House bill or the Senate bill, we're probably going to cut 1.5 or $2 trillion of spending. And then through President Trump's trade policies, tax policies, and deregulation policies, we're going to grow faster. So what's really important is the debt to GDP. So it's that number. So we're going to grow the GDP and then shrink the growth of the debt. And that completely changes the trajectory. So we were left with a mess. It was 6.5, 6.7% deficit to GDP. So, imagine a household that's overspending by that much every year. And we're going to bring that down slowly. And I've said I'd like to see the deficit get back to something with a 3 in front of it by the end of the president's term in 2028. That's about the long-term average. And we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And we are constraining the spending, and we're going to grow the economy. Nobody does that better than President Trump.
And in the budget, there's a measure to increase the amount of money that we put into the IMF. Is that do you think it's enough? And why are we doing that?
We are going to give the multilateral development banks a chance. And I am in contact with the head of the IMF, the head of the World Bank. And what's happened is the Democrats just let them do what they wanted and let them create these green agendas, climate agendas, DEI agendas, and they just got so far off course. Republicans had never paid much attention to them because they didn't really like them. And it was what I would call benign neglect. And I have this saying, nature may abhor a vacuum. The Chinese don't. So the Chinese have just moved into these institutions and are trying to take them as much of the global South, the BRICS. So I gave a speech during IMF World Bank Week here in Washington, and I said, we're going back to basics, core principles, and we'll see. I'm optimistic that we can leverage we're the largest shareholders. I'm optimistic that through capital contributions, we can leverage our shareholdings and then leverage our influence, but we're going to do it properly, and we're going to be in it to win it.
Yeah. Now let's just talk about your childhood. What makes you tick? You grew up in a small town, I guess, in South Carolina. I was impressed to hear that your father had the largest science fiction collection in South Carolina. I'm a sci-fi buff myself. What was he like?
Look, he loved to read. I think that I knew I could show you Alpha Centauri on a map before I could show you Chicago.
Right.
And he'd sit and we'd talk, we'd look at the stars. We'd talk about who was out there, when we were going to be able to go out there. One of my childhood memories is being woken up and to watch Neil Armstrong walk on the moon.
Yeah,
and so he was a great dreamer. He was a great dreamer, not always a great executor.
Yes, so he went broke, didn't he? Twice, right. And what impact did that have on you? I think you said watching the family home that's been in the family for generations get sold off.
Well, that or watching the family belongings get carried out, things like that. And
how old were you?
First time 9,
right?
8, 9.
Right.
So I got my first job when I was 9.
Right.
So
because of that.
I didn't want to be a victim, and it was okay. You can do one or two things. You could just sit around and wring your hands, or you can go out, take control of your own life, which I did at age 9.
What did you do?
I had 2 jobs actually. One, I worked on the beach putting out umbrellas and chairs because as a lifeguard, you're supposed to do like the one thing, not get your hair wet.
Right.
And so I did that, and then I also worked in a restaurant bussing tables.
Wow.
I can tell you that's why I support the president's no tax on tips, because I was getting tips when I was 9 years old.
You knew what it was like.
Yep.
And your father, so did it break him? I mean, what was the impact on him? I mean, your parents split up, didn't they?
Yeah. My mom was married 5 times.
Right. Wow.
So,
twice to your father.
Twice to my father, kind of like Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton.
Yes.
So there's a lot of passion there.
He was the love of her life.
Allegedly, but I think that's why I am so focused on the debt here and having responsible finances, because that's one of the things that I always did for me, having that experience early on. Because I can tell you, our family had been one of the first arrivals in South Carolina. We had been affluent for 250, 300 years,
right? And
then just some mistakes he made. Too much real estate leverage, some neglect, that all of a sudden the lifestyle ended.
Right.
And I'm going to make sure we don't do the same thing in the U.S. It's the 250th anniversary next year, and we are not going to make the same mistakes my family did. The United States is going to be affluent for the next 250 years.
And what did that mean for you, at that tender age, that the lifestyle changed? I mean, did you have to go to a different school?
Yeah, I mean, it's all those things. I think my golf game would probably be much better if I'd been golfing instead of working. But again, it also taught me this incredible independence, this incredible self-sufficiency, and it also. You're never afraid of anything. Anything's possible. Right.
The worst has happened.
One of the worst things has happened.
Yeah.
My first job in New York, I think some people might have thought it would have been beneath them, but I took it because it was a great chance to be a stock market analyst. But it was also the fellow who owned the firm said, "Oh, you can sleep on the sofa at the office."
Oh, really?
It was great. It was great. I had a free place to live in Manhattan at age 19.
Yeah. Let's talk about your career. You wanted to be a journalist, I think, at one point. But
well, this is journalist computer scientist. I couldn't figure out which one. And
me too, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, journalism seems to have worked out, Miranda.
Yeah.
So,
yes, I'm happy I made that decision. Yeah.
But I will tell you, when I arrived, I think one of the things that broke me from computer science was when I arrived at Yale in 1980. Maybe some of your older the viewers and listeners can remember what punch cards were.
Yes, right.
And so Yale had just switched from punch cards, the university computing system, to screens and keyboards. And the transition was a disaster. I mean, worse than anything I've seen at the IRS here.
Wow,
which
must
was
have been bad.
It was bad. Yeah. And it just broke me. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this. And then, that back in the 80s, newspapers, Time Magazine, Newsweek, the newspaper at Yale is called the Yale Daily News. And if you became editor-in-chief of that, you pretty much got a ticket to be a reporter in one of those. And I ran for it, lost, kind of pounded for 3 months, and then picked myself up, did this internship in New York. And it turned out that investing suited me because it was a combination of quantitative and the computer side, and then journalism. Investing, a lot of it's really telling a story.
Right.
So putting those two together.
Researching, creating a narrative.
Researching, creating a narrative. Is there a story here? Is there not? Being willing, I'm sure you've done tons of research and just, there's nothing here.
Right.
Or put it on the shelf, bring it back. And so it was a great combination of qualitative and quantitative. My sister always says, you're really lucky because what you love doing and for up until I took a position here at Treasury, I was doing it 15, 20 hours a day. So what you love doing pays well.
Right. Yes, that's right.
But you'd probably be doing it if it didn't.
Yeah. Do you have I asked President Trump about he had musical aptitude, and his mother, everyone was surprised, got him to learn the flute. Do you have any sort of creative outlets? I love architecture and all that. So again, this is why I'm fascinated by this building. It's not only an honor for me to be in the White House, but it's very visually inspiring. Yeah. And this is the first time I've ever lived in Washington, and just the monumental buildings and the history and I moved here from Charleston, South Carolina. You had a beautiful house there that you'd renovated. Yes. Yeah. And so Charleston has the largest historic district in America, and it's always voted the #1 tourist destination. So it's great that people all over the world want to come and see it. Mm. And so back to your big job was to work for George Soros, who I guess he's like the bête noire of the MAGA movement. Yep. What's he like? And do you still talk to him? No, I haven't spoken to him since 2016. And look, George is very smart. For most of the time I was there, so I was at Soros Fund Management twice. My real mentor is Stan Druckenmiller, right, yes, who's most incredible genius investor in history, but also just the best person. He cares about his family. He and a few other people in New York, Ken Langone, this fellow Jeff Canada started this thing, Harlem Children's Zone, which takes these kids at a very young age and helps their families move them forward, and break the kind of generational poverty problem. And but so I worked mostly for Stan, but interacted with George.
And I'll tell you what George is really good at is figuring out how systems work, how they accelerate, and how they break down. And what we saw with what he did with the district, mainly the district attorneys, he figured out that, and again, I was there until 2000, and George's political activities were really limited to helping bring down the Iron Curtain.
Right.
And, very laudable.
Yes.
When I got there, what is now the notorious Open Society Foundation, I think it was 5. It was either 3 Hungarians, 2 Russians, 3 Hungarians. But they were sneaking, you can remember, fax machines behind the Iron Curtain.
Oh, wow. So doing good work.
So that the dissidents could get the word out. And then by the time I came back in 2011, George was more politically polarizing, but it hadn't really accelerated.
Why did that happen? Did he get married to someone woke or something?
No, I don't know what it was. No. I've never been able to figure it out. The country's been great to him.
And why the district attorneys? Why does he want to do that?
Oh, because like I said, what George is very good at is figuring out systems. And he figured out that there's a lot of money in presidential politics, Senate, House races, but at the district attorneys, if you have a view of a different kind of America, those are easy races.
Yeah, cheap.
So he went in and was able to get a lot of progressive candidates over the line, defund the police, decriminalize this, decriminalize that.
But that's been hugely destructive to the country and law and order. So why would he want that chaos?
Again, he has a very different vision than I do, President Trump. But it's a vision that some people in America have, and I'm not happy he did it. But shame on us, shame on our movement for letting him do
allowing it to happen.
For allowing it to happen. But I will tell you, one of the things that I was involved with was something called Moms for Liberty.
Yes.
Because what was even less expensive was taking over the school boards.
Yes.
And it turned out that many of these school boards, the school board members were funded by teachers unions.
Of course.
Or the other left-wing groups.
Yeah.
So to get on a school board, a candidate might spend $1,000 of their own money.
Yeah.
But if a teachers union shows up and puts in $20,000, then that candidate's going to win.
Of course.
But, who knows who the school board member is? So just with not much money, this group, others have been able to push back against the takeover of school boards, and also to do more with charter schools or school vouchers, school choice.
That's incredible. So you donated to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
I've been very active. In school choice.
Yeah. And now, one of the things you did, you were just 30 years old. You pulled off the biggest, I guess, trade in the history of 100 years
at the time.
At the time, yes. Which was you broke the Bank of England. Tell us, you came up with that idea. What made you think of that, and did you realize what you were really the enormity of it at the time? Well,
look, it was a group effort. My contribution. So it was Stan Druckenmiller had this idea that there's something called the exchange rate mechanism.
Yeah.
The pound was tied to the German mark. This is before the euro, and was trading in a band. So Stan had this idea that it might not stay in the band. My contribution was I was running the SFM office in London, and I was observing that there was a big property hangover after Margaret Thatcher, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer had been a fellow called Nigel Lawson. And there was something called the Lawson housing boom, and he had really gunned the economy to get Baroness Thatcher reelected through housing.
Right.
And they really made working class Brits into homeowners. But what I realized was the mortgage structure in the UK very different than the US. In the US, we have 5, 10, 30-year mortgages. In the UK, at the time, 90% of the mortgages moved up and down with the Bank of England's interest rate. So if the Chancellor raised rates on Wednesday, your mortgage went up on a Friday.
Right.
So you had no certainty. So what happened was, as we went in and started selling pounds and buying Deutschmarks, the surefire way to chase away a currency speculator is to make it expensive.
Yeah.
So the Bank of England, the British government, were raising interest rates, and they kept raising rates and raising rates. We'll take a little bit of short-term pain, but they will bankrupt all the new homeowners that they have in the country,
right? Which
they did. They created a property crisis.
Right.
And so eventually the British government had to say, uncle, they came out of the exchange rate mechanism. And
you guys made $1 billion.
In a day.
In a day?
In a day.
Wow.
Yep.
Bit of champagne popped that night?
Well, it was a good day.
Yeah, yeah.
Good day.
Incredible. And you also know King Charles and Queen Camilla too, don't you?
I do.
How do you know them?
I do. I was introduced to then Prince Charles back in the 90s. And then I got to know then just Camilla Parker Bowles.
Yes.
And I invited her to come stay with me out in the Hamptons at my home there.
Wow.
And it was our first trip to the U.S.
Right.
So that 1999. And then we stayed in touch ever since. I'm looking forward to seeing them.
And what was she like then? She was
very down to earth.
Right.
Very English county lady that I could see why she's probably the love of then Prince Charles's life.
Yeah.
That they seem to be very similar, have a great time together, a lot in common.
So that brings me to John, your husband. You have 2 children together, Cole and Caroline.
Yep.
Tell me, he was a former New York prosecutor.
He was
very handsome.
Well, your words, not mine. Born at real New Yorker,
right.
Born at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, grew up in New York, Jesuit schools, and an attorney and a prosecutor, which comes out a lot of times during arguments. And he was a prosecutor in the Bronx.
Oh, wow.
In the Bronx County District Attorney's Office up by Yankee Stadium.
So he saw a lot of life.
And death.
Yes. So
during the worst murder years for New York.
Huh.
So I think 1989 to 1992, 93.
Pre-Giuliani.
Pre-Giuliani.
Yeah.
I remember, I still remember when Giuliani won.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah. You could see what a mayor could do, what a politician can do.
Well, and then unfortunately I was living in New York when Bill de Blasio won, and you got to see what the other side did.
That's right. And so tell me, how did you and John meet?
We were introduced by friends.
Right.
Yep.
And was it love at first sight?
I don't know. I don't know.
Are you a romantic?
Sorry?
Are you a romantic?
I am practical.
Right.
I'm practical.
Right. So when did you find out that you were gay? I mean, when did you realize?
Well, I think you and I have talked about it before. I actually was offered an appointment to the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
And given that my dad had decided to have another financial hiccup right before I left for university.
Great.
Timing couldn't have been worse. Yeah. But I want to serve my country.
Yeah.
I want to serve my country. And the good part of that was also it's the service academies here are the government pays for your education. Then you go and you spend 5 years as an officer. So coming back to that, this is a dream for me because I'd want to serve my country since I was 17 or 18.
Right.
But back then, so this is 1979, there were no gays in the military. And Yeah, look, I didn't want to break the rules. I didn't want to hide things. And thought it was probably a better idea to go to Yale and work 3 jobs.
That's quite a lot of integrity, though, to not want to.
Well, it was a lot of integrity, but I am an eminently practical person.
Yeah.
And you could be court-martialed.
Right.
Like they used to follow people off the bases.
Right.
And like, what are you doing in your private life? What are you?
And what an amazing time now. I mean, you've gone full circle. You're now married. You have 2 children. And you're not that Donald Trump ever talks about it, and neither do you, or make a big deal about it. It's obviously merit, but still it is kind of historic that you are the first gay Treasury Secretary. And
well, thanks to President Trump, the highest ranking U.S. government official in the history of the United States.
Yeah.
But as I always say, it's coincident, not causal. He wanted the best people. I sleep very well at night knowing that it's because he thinks that I can advance the economy for the American people, handle the finances, and get his agenda rather than some
identity politics thing.
Some identity politics.
Yeah. But still, I mean, the position that you're in must be for young gay boys maybe growing up to see you in that position and that it is on merit. You must sort of feel happy that you've done that.
Yeah, no, yeah. Look, but yeah. I'm happy about it. But I think it may go back to my dad's interest in science fiction. I always thought everything was possible.
Yes.
Like I was just unconstrained in my thinking, unconstrained in the possibilities in life. Like, from Little River, South Carolina to sitting at Buckingham Palace with the royals, being back and forth. For those who don't know, on your show, that Treasury building is part of the White House campus.
Yes.
So it's Treasury, White House, Eisenhower office building. So I'm back and forth in and out of the Oval Office. I have a good imagination. I couldn't have imagined this.
Yeah. I mean, you're very similar in that way to Donald Trump, in that just enormous self-belief and kind of no barriers on what your ambition is.
Well, it's that, and also it's a different way of looking at the world. Mm. Like this Ukraine minerals deal, the president, and we'll call it, it's really an economic partnership. That was President Trump's idea. Mm. And it was, well, we put in all this money. A large segment of the American population is becoming disillusioned with the U.S. overseas incursions. We've got this big debt. So what is a better way to engage with a country in distress? So now, despite President Zelensky's kind of toing and froing, once the agreement was signed, there's no daylight between the Ukrainian people and the American people. And if they win, we win. If we win, they win. And I always say economic security is national security. That when the Iron Curtain came down, the Ukrainian economy and the Polish economy were the same size. The Polish economy is now 3 times bigger.
Right.
So when this tragic conflict ends, and perhaps with the help of this economic partnership, if the Ukraine economy could grow at that rate, then I think the Russians might be afraid of them at that point.
Right. So that's their security, is economic growth.
But it was just a different way. And when President Trump came up with this, when I showed up in Kyiv to encourage President Zelensky to sign it, we were just pilloried.
Yes.
Especially the foreign policy community. How dare you do this and do that?
Is that why Zelensky refused to play ball? Because the foreign policy wonks were all telling him not to?
No, I think President Zelensky internally has been dealt a tough hand. And Ukraine, I can't remember where it ranks, but it's the 102nd, 105th most corrupt country in the world.
We know that from the
Burisma.
Yes, that's right.
And
laptop from hell.
So I think he had a lot of domestic constituencies who didn't want this partnership signed, because what it does is it makes sure the money goes to Ukraine people.
And not to the oligarchs.
Not to the oligarchs. It's not siphoned off to the south of France.
Mm-hmm.
It's not siphoned off to the Geneva bank account.
Why was he so obstreperous in that? You were sitting there in that meeting. It was probably even more stressful in there or tense when you were there in person. Why do you think he did that?
I actually didn't find it that stressful.
Oh, really?
I was incredulous. I was incredulous because we had the economic deal and we'd had a fantastic week that week. And again, this is one of the real perks for me, that on Monday or Tuesday, we'd had President Macron and the French delegation come in, and we had a great meeting in the Oval with them. We had a great working lunch and press conference. Day before, we had Prime Minister Keir Starmer from the UK. And again, same thing, great meeting in the Oval. Some great chemistry between the Prime Minister and President Trump. Very robust working lunch. So Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, all President Zelensky had to do was come in, have a press conference. If he was out of sorts, could have done it over the meal. Instead.
But he's an actor. He knows how he comes across. He must have done that for a reason.
Look, he's a vaudevillian.
Right.
He's a vaudevillian. He's a guy who got thrust into unusual and dangerous circumstances and has played a tough hand. And I think with President Trump wants to end the war. And so he needs to negotiate with both sides. And I think to some people, that's outrageous.
Yeah.
Like the other day, someone said, do you think Putin's a war criminal? I said, so what? If he is, you still got to negotiate with him.
Yeah.
But look, we didn't end I'm sure today that the Japanese in World War II would be considered war criminals, but we signed a treaty with them to end the war.
Of course.
You can't, usually the people who start wars are not good people.
President Trump, I think, is probably, to use George W. Bush's word, the most misunderestimated president we've had. Do you see the method in what he does? To me, he's sort of operating on a number of different levels. It's not all chaos and craziness.
Well, that in game theory, which I've studied a lot, there's something called strategic uncertainty. President Trump creates a lot of strategic uncertainty. He creates a lot of optionality. The biggest misunderstanding about him is his love for people. Look, I have a lot of progressive friends, or when I say this in the media, he regards himself as the mayor of America. Mm-hmm. And he cares deeply about the 330 million Americans. We were taking an action at Treasury, and I said, well, sir, this may result in 300 layoffs. Well, fine. It's up to you to find jobs for those people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He really, when we were at that rally in Pittsburgh with the steel workers, I was fortunate enough to be with him the last night of his campaign in Pittsburgh, and then on to Grand Rapids, which he didn't finish till 3 a.m.
Yeah, amazing.
But it was incredible. Like, the steel workers are there. They got their hats. They got their vests. They got their families, and they believe in him. But he has a strategy, and it's not a conventional strategy. But like, what conventional person ever done great things?
Yes.
Does anybody think that Winston Churchill was conventional?
No. He's
also so flexible in terms of the way he looks at things, the way we've just spent basically the past 24 hours in the Situation Room over the Iran-Israel conflict. And I can tell you that the American people should know And the American troops should know that Donald Trump is doing an incredible job looking after their interest in what could turn, without someone like him, could turn into a widespread conflict that U.S. soldiers and interests could get sucked into.
That's comforting to know. For you, your legacy, what do you hope to achieve at the end of your 4 years?
That's a very good question, because what is difficult here at Treasury is there's so much to do every day. And just if you were to look at the kind of statutory responsibilities of the Treasury Secretary, I'm also oversee the Social Security Trust Fund,
New Sovereign Wealth Fund,
the Sovereign Wealth Fund. So it's really what I've done is taken a step back, and I assume that I will walk out of the building in January of 2029. What are the 3 to 5 things that I would have liked to have done? So stabilize the U.S. finances and put that on a good trajectory that will make sure that we have another great 250 years, bring back and make sure that Main Street and Wall Street have both done well. Because Wall Street's had a great run, and now it's Main Street's turn to also participate. And Wall Street Journal accused me of populist remarks. What's wrong with both doing well? Yeah. And then the third is, I think, to lock in the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency for many more generations. And I got lots of ideas that we're working on how to do that. I will plug a book. One thing I learned from my dad is I read constantly, and there's a new book called King Dollar, a journalist who's followed Treasury for about 40 years.
Yeah.
And he talks about every time there was a narrative that the U.S. was going to lose reserve currency status, why it's never happened. And
because crypto, that seems to be a threat to the dollar, doesn't it?
I think it's the opposite.
Oh, really?
I think stable coins could reinforce dollar supremacy, because with stable coins could end up being one of the largest buyers of U.S. treasuries or T-bills. So all of a sudden, if you are using a stable coin in Nigeria that's backed by the U.S. dollar, you don't actually have to have dollars. It's on your phone. You can transact. So I think there's a very good chance that crypto is actually one of the things that locks in dollar supremacy.
And is that why it was crucial that Donald Trump get involved in crypto rather than trying to constrain it like Joe Biden was?
I think constrain's too mild a word. I think make it extinct.
Oh.
So this administration's commitment to digital assets, it's innovation, because there's so many other things that happen around digital assets. And also, it's one of those things that it's one of the most important phenomena that's happening in the world, and the U.S. just ignored it. And what we are doing, the very good bill that may get voted in the Senate next week after, that will bring crypto and digital assets and make the U.S. the leader. So just as we're the leader in AI, just as we are the leader in biomedicine, we will become the leader in this on the technology side. And here, led by Treasury, led by some great leadership in the Senate, and this is bipartisan. There may be 16 Democrats who are going to vote with Republicans on this bill. So it tells you how the inclination toward crypto was there. It was just the White House, the previous administration wanted to kill it. So once we get this bill passed, the U.S., we can put our best standards and practices out to the world. Right? It won't be something that happens in a Caribbean island. It won't be something that is used for nefarious purposes or primarily used for nefarious purposes in the Middle East.
It sounds like it's just another of the messes that you've had to clean up from the Biden administration and your predecessor, Janet Yellen.
There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. And one of the things with low-hanging fruit was bringing everybody back to the office.
Yeah.
Work from home wasn't working. And people like being back in the Treasury building. And I tell you, one of the great upside surprises for me has been the professional staff, the career staff here at Treasury. I would have hired most of the people I met in my private business.
Right. Well, that's comforting.
They're fantastic. I need a 25-page report this weekend with pleasure. So
2 quick final questions. These are, I asked President Trump as well. They're sort of a bit off-piste, but so he says that the one quality that he looks for in people that he thinks is a recipe for success is energy. Is there something that you see in people that makes you think that they're going to be something, be successful?
I always say, and I think I'm just a more nuanced version of what he's just said. I call it love of the game. Michael Jordan would have a great basketball game, and most basketball players have in their contract that they can't play for fun. He had a love of the game clause, so he would actually go out and shoot baskets afterwards.
Really?
Or he would play on weekends. So in my investment business, I would always try to tell, like, do you dream about the currency markets? Do you dream about the stock market? Are you always trying to find a new angle to make money? So it's like love of the game.
All consuming. Yeah. And parenting tips. Donald Trump is a great father, obviously, because he's got such a good relationship with his adult kids. So do you have parenting tips?
Time. Nothing. I remember talking to you once, and you were taking your boys to rugby in Paris, I think.
Yes.
And it's just, I think there's nothing that makes up for time. That I was fortunate that I had time. Also, the ability to tell you can do. I told my son, he had maybe a little wobble one term in academics. And I said, look, my self-worth isn't whether you get into the Ivy League or not. I have a pretty sound ego. I just don't want you in 4 years to not have choices. So trying not to live your life through your kids or what you didn't do. So I think it's time, and just let them do what they want to do
to get their own love of the game.
Yeah, well, help them find what's the game they love.
Yes,
what's the game they love. My son just started rowing, and it's changed his life.
Really,
changed his life.
My son's rowed as well. It's an amazing discipline.
Amazing discipline. That we were together over the Christmas break. And he was in kind of his athletic gear.
Yeah.
And I said, where are you going? He goes, no, I've already been to the gym. I was there at 6.
Oh, wow. How old is he?
15.
That's amazing.
That was amazing. I said, will the alien who's stolen my son please return him? Actually, I kind of like this son.
Yes.
So
that's wonderful.
But, he found what he liked.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. It's same with my daughter.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
No,
and
thank you.
I know you're incredibly busy, but we really appreciate it.
Thank you. I got a feeling this is going to be a long-running series you're doing.
I think
you're really great at this.
Oh, thank you. If you missed it, go back and check out our interview with President Donald Trump last week. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. I'm Miranda Devine. Make sure to join us next week for another edition of Podforce One.